Nashville Predators back at home tonight for another preseason game, this time against the Tampa Bay Lightning. We'll look ahead to tonight's game. But the big storyline this week, maybe the battle for the fourth line. There are a lot of good players who could be on that bottom line when the season starts for the Nashville Predators. And a lot of them so far have been impressive in preseason and in camp. We'll break down some of the candidates we think might be the best fit coming up today on Locked On Predators.
Your Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Predators your first listen of the day, every single day. I'm Nick Morgan. I'm a writer and editor at ontheforecheck.com, and I have a partner in crime.
You do. I am Ann Kimmel. I'm a writer and editor at InsideThePreds.com.
It's another Preds game day, kind of, sort of. Preseason action tonight at Bridgestone Arena, 7 o'clock Central against the Tampa Bay Lightning. Remember, this was the game that was supposed to be in Tampa, but of course, everybody in Florida right now is dealing with Hurricane Ian. For all our Lightnings listeners, for all of our Panthers fans, or anybody else that has family or friends down in Florida, we're thinking of you. We hope you get through it, and we're with you on this. Let's go back to the hockey though, and preseason action tonight. What's one storyline you're watching for in tonight's game?
Gosh, I think that there are actually a lot of storylines that are going to be unfolding between tonight's game and again tomorrow night when the Predators play the Tampa Bay Lightning again. And I think part of that is how is this roster, I don't think, is becoming much more clear the more preseason action we see, in the sense that all of these players have really stepped up, not only in training camp, which training camp has been just a level of intensity. It's been hard. It's been a really intense, high energy, fast pace training camp. But also these preseason games, you look back at the doubleheader against Florida, you have a lot of players that did very well. I think, I don't think that this roster is paring itself down as quickly as maybe some other preseason rosters have. So for me, I think it's going to be interesting. Number one, the combinations that are put out on the ice, because John Hynes talked about that a little bit yesterday after practices. So I think the combinations that are put out there are going to be interesting. But I think in the next 2 days, we're going to get a look at a lot of players vying for just a few spots. So individual performances are going to be key tonight.
Yeah. And it's funny you said individual performances, because it seems like in the first two games, there were kind of two trains of thought for John Hynes. And one was, let's put the individual player in a situation where we can see how he does, kind of like with Cody Glass centering that top line with Philip Forsberg and Matt Duchene. And then there's the other, and it's like, let's put people together that we think are going to be together regular season and see how they do, like Borowiecki and Dante Fabro, or that potential second line, Johansson, Niederreiter, and Phil Tomasino. So it's kind of interesting to see, like, maybe if he dives into some clues here a little bit, maybe we get a look at what that fourth line is going to be, which is something that we're going to talk about today. But that's going to kind of be the interesting thing, is there's players that you want to see, like, where do they fit in? And then there's like combinations of people that you want to see together. And it's like, okay, how's their chemistry together? Because it can be a very different thing. Like, you can shine and just be like a dynamo in preseason. You can be doing everything right. You may just not have that ideal fit for one of the lines in the Nashville Predators. And again, this is interesting, because we have a lot of people that have done very well in camp, in preseason so far, that are battling for, at this point, and what seems like 4 roster spots up front.
Yeah, there are not a lot of opportunities for players who have shown they're ready for an opportunity so far in preseason. And I think that really has John Hynes and the coaching staff putting a lot of focus, a lot of emphasis on what happens in these next 2 games and also what happens when they have an exhibition game in Switzerland as well. They're going to need every last moment of on ice competition, I think, to land where they want to land. Because like you said, they're not only just looking for individuals, but they have a whole fourth line. What do they want this line to do? Do they want this to be just, a physical line, a shutdown line? Do they want this line to have some scoring punch? Because you have a number of players to pull from that could potentially be ready for some NHL minutes. But are you going to get from them what you want from this fourth line? And I think he's going to be putting some lines out tonight and tomorrow, combinations to see, okay, hey, is this combination of players going to be a shutdown kind of fourth line, or is this going to be a secondary scoring fourth line? So I think that there are still questions about what they need in the fourth line on top of who can meet that need. And these players are really not making it easy on Hynes, which is great because it felt like last year it was like the fourth line was kind of like, well, we got a body.
Somebody be good enough to play on the fourth line.
Yeah, like, let's just, okay, you could go here. There's a spot here. And that's very different than how this fourth line is going to be constructed this season, which super refreshing. But I would not want to be John Hynes and the training staff right now because these players they're not ready to eliminate themselves from the conversation, and they are performing well in the practice situations. And I think most of them performed really well when we saw them against Florida. So this is wide open. I really do think a lot about the fourth line is wide open.
Yeah. So look at the last year's fourth line. We had Michael McCarron kind of towards the end of the season, Nick Cousins, and Phil Tomasino. Obviously, Cousins is not here. Phil Tomasino seems like he's been bumped up to maybe a top 6 role. So that leaves a couple of interesting people. One of them is Michael McCarron himself. Now, it's funny because it's always seems like, oh, God, we got to find a replacement for McCarron. That seems to be the sentiment when you look at Twitter and stuff. But he didn't play bad last year, Ann.
Right.
He was pretty solid defensively. He had a little bit of offensive punch. I'm sure a lot of that was playing with Phil Tomasino, but it's not like, oh my God, this guy's a detriment. There's got to be something better out there. He did his role and he did it pretty well. And, you look at camp and he's had a good start to camp. In the first preseason game, he played the first game and was very effective, went to the net hard, drew a penalty in the first minute or so. So there's that. He was very effective offensively. Defensively, he put a pretty good tape together, especially on the penalty kill. So my question is, why are people counting out Michael McCarron, maybe your fourth line center to start the season?
Yeah, I don't know. And we had talked about this on another show that we've been a part of some conversations where people are like, anybody but Michael McCarron. Like, can we just, get anybody but Michael McCarron? He's just a big body. That's not really true. If you're looking for somebody to play, kind of a shutdown physical line in the fourth line, Michael McCarron is kind of that guy. And I agree with you. It's very different. You have to get a look at Michael McCarron without somebody like Phil Tomasino, because Phil Tomasino is a little bit of a line changer. You know what I'm saying? Like, things are going to look a little bit different with Phil Tomasino on a line, especially, going forward, just as he matures and as his game gets a little bit better and faster. But Michael McCarron, in and of himself, has a lot of upside, and he did a lot of things like penalty kill. And those, that on a resume is going to weigh differently. He's not just 6'6"?
6'5".
6'5". He's not just a whole lot of hockey player on there. To be able to have him where you can put him out there on things like the penalty kill, these kind of things are all weighed. All of these little skill sets are going to be a part of the equation. And Michael McCarron is not somebody that I think Predators fans should say, oh, thank God we're going to get rid of him. no, he's somebody to have in your pocket. Like, I would not be surprised to see him make fourth line roster spot.
No, 100% agree. I think he's going to be in contention. And if he doesn't get it, I think he at least fits in maybe as your extra forward or one of your
For
extra
sure.
depending on how many people the Preds carry into the season. We assume, a full 23, but we don't know if there's going to be one extra forward and two extra D-men like there were for a lot of last year, or if you maybe bring two extra forwards and then maybe just have Mark Borowiecki or Jeremy Lauzon as kind of your extra person. So there's kind of a lot to see on this one. Plenty of more players that are pushing for a spot on the bottom pair, including somebody that we talked about a little bit with the Locked On Avs crew yesterday, Kiefer Sherwood. He's been a wild card so far. So we'll talk about him in a second. First, though, want to mention today's show brought to you by our friends at Bet Online. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your favorite sports this season. You can find all the latest player developments, team matchup news, podcasts, and in-depth articles and analysis on every game you can find this season, from college football to pro football, boxing, MLB, MMA, golf, soccer, and of course, the NHL. They put out a bunch of new stuff to get you ready for the 2022-23 NHL season, including some of our early predictions on scoring bets for teams, how many points certain players are going to get. So be sure you check that out. As always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. So head to betonline.net or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, and we've been talking about a couple of solid players this year that may find their way up into the lineup, especially on that fourth line. Let's talk about a guy who last year didn't really, well, we're going to get to the guy you're thinking a little bit.
I'm dying.
Let's start with a guy that has kind of battled for a fourth line role just because there's not really anywhere else for him to really battle. Eeli Tolvanen. Now, look, we assume, here's the thing. There's a disclaimer with this where Eeli Tolvanen may go up to the second line if things don't work out with Phil Tomasino on that line. It sounds like there still could be a battle with him, but it certainly seems like they're going to want Phil Tomasino up there. And that leaves the question of, what do you do with Eeli Tolvanen?
Yeah. And I hate that we are asking that question, because I think this is a player who does so very many things right. And honestly, if you think about it, when, I really like the kind of breadth of talent that you have if you have Tomasino, Niederreiter, and Johansson together. I really like that. You've got physical players, you've got net front presence, you have Phil Tomasino, who's a hamster in a wheel on the ice, kind of creating some things. But also, if you take Eeli Tolvanen and put him with Niederreiter and Johansson, that ain't nothing neither. So I'm with you. There's, we'll see where he ends up. He may end up with some minutes there, but I think you're right. For what we're seeing in preseason, it looks like he's battling for a fourth line spot. I don't know how the Predators don't have him on the ice game in and game out. I understand he, scoring wise, offensively, quite a drought last season, but he does so many things well. And I think that had he not come into the franchise, into the organization, been introduced to the fan base, the way that he was with his offensive punch kind of being the highlight, I think people maybe would appreciate more how well-rounded his game is, because the thing that's missing is the thing that he had a great reputation for right now. I don't know how you don't put Eeli Tolvanen on the ice for 82 games, although, didn't happen last season. He was, he was scratched a couple of times. But I think, especially if you're looking for a fourth line that kind of potentially has the balance of both, depth scoring and also shutdown, because he's so great. He has a great two-way game. He's very defensively responsible. I don't know how the Predators don't have Eeli Tolvanen on the fourth line. And yet there's a part of me that's like, Are you going to have Ellie Tolvin on the ice for
Yeah.
82 games? I don't know. Like,
that seems like the question mark, though, doesn't it? Like, it's where does Ellie Tolvin fit in with this team? And does he actually fit in at all with John Hynes? I mean, we assume he's going to be somewhere, but it's sort of got the towards the end of last season, especially, it sort of kind of felt like Victor Arvidsson the year before, where it just felt like, what? It just doesn't seem like he's a John Hynes guy, which is weird because the big breakthrough season the year before, of course, came under John Hynes. It just doesn't seem like he's gotten to the point of where the Predators really expected him to be. And of course, last year he was on the second line. That was kind of his big audition. This was like them saying, you know what, we're ready for you to take the next step. And he didn't. I mean, he did a lot of things well. Very good 200-foot player, very good defensive forward. I just think they were thinking, he's a little bit more than what we're thinking. And he did get bumped down to the fourth line a couple of times last year and played fairly well. Because I think he does, the core of his game is kind of what John Hynes wants for an identity, which is, that solid, good two-way mindset. It just didn't really translate to production last season.
And that, you just said something that jumped out at me, because so much about Ellie Tolvanen's game is exactly what John Hynes wants.
Well, what do you think he wants? Like, from everything he said.
From what he says,
but just, him being healthy scratched a bunch, especially leading towards the playoffs, raises the question. It's like, what else is happening here?
Yeah.
Like, because it's like from our perspective, it looks like he fits in great with what John Hynes wants to do.
Right.
But John Hynes isn't playing him. So what's the deal here? Like, is there something else? Do they picture Ellie Tolvanen playing a different way than what we're seeing him play?
Yeah. Yeah. And that, I think, is what was so mystifying last year. Is like, he's doing all of the things you're asking for, except the scoring, which obviously is key, but yet I don't know. Yeah. I come back to, I don't see how this franchise does not put Ellie Tolvanen on the ice most of this season. I don't know how you don't have him on the ice with what he can do and how well-rounded his game is.
Let's talk about a free agent that I think kind of went under the radar when he was signed, and a lot of people kind of waved him off. That's Zach Sanford.
Yeah.
Zach Sanford is a guy that it seems like it's like buying a piece of furniture at Goodwill. You're not this might be an antique desk worth like $5,000. This might be full of termite damage. You don't really know what you're getting in Zach Sanford. Now, look, he is a guy that when he signed, a lot of people are like, oh yeah, this is a very, very tall man that David Poile likes. I think our buddy Sean Smith, who's been a guest on here a couple of times, he said he excels in the stat height over 6 feet. That's like the big thing that attracted him to the Preds. But you break down his game, and there's a little bit of intrigue here. And he is very pretty good defensively. I think that was kind of like the big thing the Preds got him. He was like one of Ottawa and Winnipeg's like top penalty killers off the ice. Didn't really work out because both those teams are garbage. But you look, and the years prior to that, when he was in St. Louis, he did do very well in the like the penalty killing department. And so a lot of people are like, oh yeah, this is just kind of like a depth whatever guy. You go back to the lockout shortened season, and he had 30 points.
Yes.
In 50 games, including 16 goals. So it's not like this is just like a nothing guy that you're going to put out there. There is some scoring potential in Zach Sanford also. And it kind of brings you back to, okay, I mean, it feels like this is a guy that could develop into kind of a wild card for the Nashville Predators.
Yeah, this was one of those signings where I think people, like you said, sort of glossed over, oh yeah, okay, they picked up some big guy. But there's a lot of potential in Zach Sanford's game. And like you said, it's there. If you look, this is somebody who has the ability to score, but he also, again, plays that what we think of as a prototypical John Hynes kind of game, especially if you're looking for somebody on the fourth line. And look, he is big. He's 6'4", little over 200 pounds, zero judgment here about that. But I think he brings more to the table than big body fourth line. I think he's good. Like, his checking game is very good. So definitely somebody to keep an eye on. And he is somebody in my mind that I think would be a little bit higher in my thought process if it weren't for the fact that we still haven't even touched on all the other options that are out there too. So Zach Stanford is somebody to keep your eye on. I think in the next, tonight or tomorrow night, on wherever he slots in on the roster, because I think he's somebody that the Preds are keeping their eye on. Also, I want to give you a shout out for comparing this season to like Antiques Roadshow, because that is 100%. Like, do you have, a painting you got at the garage sale for $2 and it's worth nothing? Or do you have a Monet? Like, that is 100% the vibe of this preseason.
Yeah. It's interesting because there's a lot of people, and for Zach Sanford, he signed a 1-year contract that wasn't super expensive, but it's a one-way deal, so you feel like the Predators are going to do everything they can to kind of make him the guy. And it's one of those things where if he gets beat out, he's probably going to be put on waivers, and so probably that kind of situation. Hey, a couple of other players that we want to talk about here, and including one near and dear to your heart.
Okay, I have officially found my Rem Pitlick II, and we're going to talk about him in just a minute. But before we do, want to remind you, if you want a big picture look at what's going on in the NHL, you need to check out Locked On NHL. It is a 30-minute daily podcast where they bring experts from the Locked On arena and come together and tell you what you need to know across the league. What's going on? How are the teams looking? Who's injured? What coach is on the hot seat? All of that is discussed on Locked On NHL. You can find it anywhere you find your favorite podcasts. Locked On NHL is your daily 30-minute NHL podcast.
All right, and a couple of other people that have jumped into the conversation for bottom line guy. One of them is somebody that's kind of become your favorite person here over a little bit. Kiefer Sherwood. Now, Kiefer Sherwood is an interesting guy. The Preds signed him in the offseason. Wasn't like a big thing, although he did sign a one-way contract, so that was kind of interesting. But he is a guy that sort of played for Colorado last year. He played 10 games for the Avs, but 75 points for their minor league team. So I think a lot of people are like, okay, this is definitely like an AHL signing. This is going to like replenish the depth in Milwaukee. He has made the battle for the fourth line very interesting because it seems like, whenever you're watching like recaps of some of the, some of the practices, and whenever you're going through and watching that preseason game that he was involved in the second one, he jumps off the tape. Like, you hear that, phrase in football a lot. It's like, oh, he jumps off the tape. He always seems to be like front and center of every single play that he's on the ice with. That seems like that's been Kiefer Sherwood this offseason.
Yeah, I will tell you, went into training camp and obviously familiar with the name, but not really anybody that I was like, okay, I'm going to keep my eye on this one. This is a player who you can't help but watch. Like you said, jumps off of the tape. You mentioned last season, he was fifth. I think he had the fifth highest points in the entire AHL. So this is somebody who knows how to get things done on that level. Our friends at Locked On Avs really liked him.
Yeah.
And it felt a little bit good that we took something from them because they took our dignity. So we got Kiefer Sherwood in that trade.
I would gladly take being swept to have one Kiefer Sherwood.
Look, I'm almost there.
Yeah.
Because I really like this young man's game. He is very just instinctually John Hynes-ish as far as playing, hard to play against, physical, responsible, chases the pucks. Hey, is there a gritty area you'd like someone to go in? I'm your guy. And that's just been his natural game. So it's not like he's coming into this camp and trying to necessarily adjust what he's done previously on the ice. But you literally can't not watch him. And I'll be interested to see how he does, in tonight or tomorrow night on the ice, because we went to, I can't remember which day of training camp it was, but our friend, like we were talking about, Sean Smith was there. And I said, hey, Sean, I want you to just kind of keep an eye on number 44 and tell me what you think. And we sat and watched the scrimmage, and these scrimmages were hardcore. Like, they were intense. They were physical. They were fast paced. And every so often we would look at each other and be like, that's Sherwood. That's Sherwood. I mean, harassing the crud out of anybody with the puck. So he's got this great defensive game tune, poke checks, chasing, he is not out of a play. He just is not ever out of a play. And doing all of the little things that John Hynes loves. If he can add some scoring to that, he is my dark horse. He is my new Rem Pitlick, which means probably he's going to get waived, because that's my life. That's my life story. But he is the person at training camp that I was like, wait a second, who are you? And why aren't you on the ice more?
Yeah.
Love him.
Would he be a good addition to the Preds? He sure would. All right. Enough of that.
That was so amazing. Sure.
Hey, what about Cody Glass? Now that's somebody that it seems like it's a very interesting guy. And because it seems like, he's obviously a center, the Preds have given him every opportunity to kind of be like front and center. Obviously, he got the number one center role playing with Duchesne and Forsberg. And it kind of seems like, okay, let's see what you can do as sort of a scoring center. Let's see what he can do. And he did very, very well. In fact, we talked about it after Monday's doubleheader. He was kind of one of the guys that stood out to us. Mm-hmm. But it seems like for Cody Glass, the conversation is going to be, his future is going to go back to what we talked about earlier with John Hynes, which is, what do you want that fourth line to be?
Yeah.
Do you want it to be like the go out there and, mess people's worlds up and throw big hits and, be like diving in front of pucks and, getting in people's faces and fights and stuff like that? Because if so, that may be Cody Glass's detriment. That may be the thing that keeps him in Milwaukee another year. But you watch him play, and the question becomes, okay, it's really hard to see him going back to Milwaukee for another year, because I don't know what else he has to work on. And clearly the Preds still see some top six potential in him, but it's just like, it's like, where does he fit in right now?
Yeah. Yeah. And again, this is one of those players where I'm like, how do you not have him on the ice for 82 games? If you have him available to you, how do you not have Cody Glass on the ice? And the obvious spot right now is, fourth line. And he's somebody who could pop in if there was, God forbid, some sort of injury or that kind of thing. But how do you not put Cody Glass out there game in and game out? I don't know. But again, it comes back to, does he have enough of a game where he can do both kind of the fourth line physicality thing or the fourth line depth scoring? I think some players naturally have that.
And to be fair, he did vastly improve his two-way game.
100%.
Last season, especially after that season working with Carl Taylor. I mean, it was night and day watching him, when he first got sent down as opposed to when he got called up again for the first time.
Yeah, I would be shocked. And quite honestly, I would be so disappointed to not see Cody Glass on an opening night roster for the Predators, because I really think his game is that good now and is only going to get better. But again, when you're looking at a spot on the fourth line, there's something specific that John Hynes is looking for. Is Cody Glass going to do that? And I will say this, look, I'm a big believer in Cody Glass's talent and his ability. He has had a rough gig in the NHL. It started out great. He's had kind of a rough gig. I think he's done the work to get back. And I really would love to see him get the chance that I think his talent deserves, that his circumstances maybe have kind of gotten in the way with. So I just don't know how you don't have him on an opening night roster on a fourth line, centering a fourth line. But again, so many names, and so, it could be anything that John Hynes is looking for. So it's hard to say.
Here's an interesting question. Before there's just a couple other names I want to throw out there, but an interesting question. Do you maybe see that Herd line and the fourth line flipping a little bit? Do you maybe see Cody Glass and not Phil Tomasino, Ellie Tolvanen form a sort of this, more of a two-way kind of scoring line with somebody like Zach Stanford or Kiefer Sherwood on the wing, and all of a sudden you have more of kind of like what the Nick Bonino, Craig Smith, Rocco Grimaldi line was a few years ago, where it's like your third line, they're doing what you want them to do, but there's a little bit more of, a scoring vibe to there. And then you bump the Herd line maybe down to like the traditional grindy fourth line kind of thing, but a line that can still play 15 minutes a game very, very well. And all of a sudden now you have all this depth that you didn't really have before. Do you see a situation where that may be John Hynes' wheelhouse?
I think that's a really interesting proposition, because you do have a line already established with great chemistry that plays both styles of fourth line that John Hynes may be wrestling with. I mean, the Herd line, they are a physical, they are a shutdown line. They are a don't you wish you had your mama with you right now kind of line when they play on the ice. But again, offensive punch. So in theory, you have a line already created that can do both of what John Hynes may be looking for from a fourth line, and to be able to put a line together with Cody Glass, Ellie Tolvin, and Kiefer Sherwood may give you more depth scoring on that third line. I'm intrigued by that. The only thing is just the hitch in my giddy up with that is like, do you really want Tanner Jeannot to say he plays fourth line?
Well, but that's the thing, is you can take the numbers off the line.
That's what we need to do, because otherwise I feel judgy.
Yeah. I mean, like take him off the line for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, but like I said, like if you can do that, I mean, Colton Sissons, play him wherever you want. Just make sure he's on the ice in key moments. And same for Yakov Trenin, and same for that. I mean, and for people getting caught up on line numbers and stuff. A couple of years ago, or not a couple of years ago, but back in 2002, when the Red Wings won the Stanley Cup, their fourth line was Thomas Holmstrom, Luc Robitaille, and Igor Larionov. So, you don't have to have your big checky boys be the number, like they're the fourth line. Hey, real quick, I just want to kind of throw a couple names. We've talked about Juuso Parssinen. We have talked about Afanasieff. Maybe some of those guys coming up, even Jakob Kondolik. Have you seen anything from those guys that would make you think, okay, these guys are definitely going to maybe compete for a spot?
Really like all three of their game. I just don't. Only and because the pool is so big, I just think they don't have a lot of NHL minutes already, and I just think the pool is too big to pull from. Love what I'm seeing from them. I think those are three players that are performing well, but no, I don't.
Marcus Nurmi too.
Again, that's another one where I'm like, in a different time, Marcus Nurmi could be competing for a roster spot.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think all those guys are probably going to be in Milwaukee, although I do like what they said. Yeah, Afanasieff definitely, I think, needs a little more seasoning as well. Yeah. Another guy we didn't really mention is Cole Smith, who played very well in that first preseason game. Has obviously had some experience with the NHL level, but again, he seems like a Milwaukee guy. But that's kind of another name to watch out for as well. Yeah. So there's a lot of guys, and
a lot of guys
fighting for just a few
guys.
spots. Yeah. Yeah. So we want to know what you think. We want to know maybe who you think could be in the Predators' fourth line. Do you think they're going to keep it big, punchy, tall boys, or do you think maybe they add a little more finesse and make it another scoring line? So what we want you to do is go on to the Locked On Predators YouTube channel, leave a comment, let us know what you think the lineup should be, or tweet us at LO_Predators. Give us your thoughts, and we will love to hear them. And where can the people find your work online?
You can find my work at insidethepreds.com, and you can find me on Twitter at @AnnK_. Ooh, Mama on Ice.
It's been a long day.
It's been a long day.
You can find me on Twitter at _NSMorgan. Read my work at ontheforecheck.com. That's going to do it for us today on the Locked On Predators podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We'll be back tomorrow with an all-new episode. We'll see you then.